HR Funk here, and it appears spring has finally sprung here in northern Ohio. This is May 1st of 2018, and I have a beautiful day, so I'm out on the range getting some much needed rifle practice. And while I'm here, I thought I would answer a question that I've had from a couple of viewers with regard to some of my past rifle videos. Specifically, the comment has been that I should test my loads over a bag or with a shooting rest in order to evaluate the load to make sure that I'm getting the most accurate load I can before I start to shoot the rifle with a sling for actual competition and practice. Well, that started me thinking, can I really shoot as well with a sling as I can shooting over a bag or with a rest? And I really don't know the answer to that, so I'm going to find out today. Now, I'll say right from the get-go, I think it's probably easier to shoot accurately when you're shooting with a rest or shooting rested on a bag, but does that mean I can't maintain the same degree of accuracy when I'm shooting with a sling? And again, I don't know, so I'm going to find out. I thought I'd bring you folks along. This should be a fun video. What I'm going to do, I have several rifles out here with me today. Right now I'm set up at 200 yards. From here I'm going to use my M1, and I'm going to fire 2 5-shot groups with the M1 shooting with a sling. Then I'm going to switch over and I'm going to shoot 2 5-shot groups with the M1 shooting from a seated bench rest position with the rifle resting on a bag. And we'll see which method gives us the most accurate shots downrange. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that most of my service rifles are set up to be fired with a sling support. So when I shoot them from a bag or shoot them with a rest, the shots on the target are going to print higher than they would when I shoot the same rifle with the sling attached to my arm. Reason being, under recoil with the sling tightly cinched down to my arm, it prevents the barrel from rising while the bullet is traveling down the bore, or it prevents it from rising as much, maybe I should say. Whereas when the rifle is resting on a bag, there's going to be nothing to prevent that slight amount of muzzle rise, and the shots are going to print higher on the target. So for that reason, I'm not going to look so much at where the groups are on the target. I'm just going to look at the size of the group and see which way gives us the most accurate shooting. So here we go. We're going to start out at 200 yards with the M1, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, folks, I have the M1 loaded up. We're set up at 200 yards. I'm going to be shooting this 5-shot string from the sling, obviously, and we'll take a look at the group. We'll do it again, and then we'll try it from a bag and see which one with the M1 gives us the best group size. And there's 5, folks. Let's go take a look at the group. And here's the first group for my M1. Not looking bad. 2 10s, 1 X. I have 2 of them that went to about 11 o'clock in the 9 ring. I'm going to grab a tape measure and we'll see just exactly what that group size is. And there we go. By my calculations, that's about an 8.5-inch group from 200 yards with the M1. So I will load back up and get things ready to go again, and we'll try one more group with the sling. And it's deja vu all over again, folks. I am set up and ready to go. I'm about to shoot off this string. One thing I wanted to make you all aware of, though, is the fact that I'm dealing with some gusting winds out here today. I've got gusts up to about 15 miles per hour For the most part, they're coming directly from my 12 o'clock, but they do shift back and forth some. So keep that in mind when you're looking at some of these group sizes. And there's 5 more. Let's go take a look. And the group size is a little better that time, about 7 1/4 inches for that group. And as you can tell, the wind is screwing with my group placement a little bit. But we'll go back now and set up and try this with 5 shots from a bag and see what the group size looks like from there. Okay folks, I am now set up at the bench with the M1 resting on bags. I'm going to see how tight a group I can shoot with this same rifle from this type of a shooting position. Here we go. And there's my first 5 from the bench with the M1. Let's see what the target looks like now. Well folks, as expected, those shots had a tendency to go high. The shot group is about 9 1/2 inches. So a little bigger than I was getting off the sling. And the rifle obviously is getting a little bit more recoil. And those shots are having a tendency to go a little bit high. Well folks, the score on those last 5 shots wasn't all that bad, but again, the group size was bigger than I was getting with the sling in 2 groups before, but we're going to try it one more time with the M1 over the bags and see if we can close that group in some. And there's the last 5 from the M1 at 200 yards. Let's take a look and see how we did. And there's the best score of the day, folks. 3 10s, actually 2 X's, a 10, and 2 9s for 48 out of 50 with 2 X's. But the group size is still right at 9 inches. So I'm still shooting tighter groups with the Sling than I am off the bench, at least with the M1. Now we're going to move back to 300 yards. We're going to try a couple of different rifles and see what the results look like from there. Okay folks, I'm now set up back at 300 yards with my M1A. We're going to try 5 shots from back here with the rifle supported by the Sling. Then we'll go take a look at the target and see what the group size looks like. And there's 5, folks. Let's go take a look at the target. And the M1A Super Match is living up to its name, folks. 4 out of those 5 shots went into 2 inches from 300 yards. Now, unfortunately, the 5th shot opened up the overall group to right about or just below 6 inches. So 2 minutes of angle for that group from 300 yards. Again, 4 out of the 5 looking really good. I think I might make an elevation adjustment, bring those up a little closer to the middle of the target. Well, those first 5 shots out of the M1A went into a pretty smoking group down there, folks. If I can do that again, I'll be pretty happy. Here we go, second 5-shot string with the M1A Super Match from a Sling. And there's 5 more shots out of the M1A Super Match. Let's take a walk 300 yards down range and we'll see how they look. Folks, you gotta love it when you're shooting an iron-sighted rifle and you come down range and there's nothing on the 300-yard target outside the black. This group is a little bit bigger than the last one. The last one was 6 inches. This one is right about 8 1/4 inches. So now I'm going to go back up range and set things up, and we're going to try the M1A Super Match from the bags and see what the groups look like from there. And we're all set up with the M1A Super Match at the bench on top of the bags, and we're going to try our first 5-shot group from here and see how they look. And there's 5 from the bag. Folks, this is what you call a crying shame. There are 4 shots in a nice tight group here, not quite as tight as we saw when I was shooting from the sling. Those are about 3.5 inches that those went into. But this shot down here opens the group up to 9.5 inches. So 9.5 inch group for my first try from 300 yards with the M1A Super Match, shooting it from the bags. And here we go with group number 2 from the M1A Super Match from 300 yards, shooting from the bags. And there's the second 5 shots from the M1A from the bags. And a nice looking group here. 2 X's, a 10, 2 9s, and they went into about 7 inches. Now, for all of you who have been yelling at me throughout this video about using a rifle with an optic and stop using those old-fashioned rifles with the old-fashioned iron sights, I now have my AR-15 service rifle with the loopholed VXR Patrol optic mounted on top. We're going to try 5 shots with the rifle from a sling support and see what the group looks like. And there's 5 shots with the AR from 300 yards. Let's go take a look. And there's not a bad group out of the AR from 300 yards. We've got an X, 1, 2, 3 10s, and 1 9. Just a lone 9 out there. Kept it from being a perfect score of 50 out of 50. And the group size is about 5.5 inches, or just shy of that, maybe more like 5 1/4. So all in all, not bad with the AR from the sling at 300 yards. And here's group number 2 from the sling with the AR. And there's 5 more. Shot number 3 looked a little low and left, so if there's one low and left on the target, I think that one's going to be a called flyer. And the group opened up a little bit that time, which is not surprising because the wind also picked up. Shot number 3, I'm sure, is this one. That's the one that I thought went low and left, and it did go low and left. But I've got an X, a 10, and 3 9s this time. And they're all in a group of 8.5 inches. And I'm all set up and ready to go with my first 5-shot group from the AR over top of the bags. And of course, just to make it interesting, the wind is picking up. That's about a 12, 13 mile an hour gust. Fortunately, it's coming straight toward me, so hopefully it won't affect the bullet too much. Here we go. And due to miscounting on my part, this is going to be a 4-shot group. So let's go take a look. And our 4-shot group out of the AR is looking very good. That is just under a minute of angle for 4 shots at 300 yards. The group size is about 2 3/4 inches. And here we go with group number 2 off the bags with the AR. And there's the last 5 out of the AR. Let's go see where they landed. And here's another smoking group from 300 yards, folks, with the AR-15 from the bench. I've got an X, 3 10s, one of them just made it out into the 9 ring. So the group size is about 4 1/4 inches. So from 300 yards, that would be about 1 1/3 minutes of angle. Very good groups with the AR shooting from the bench. Well, folks, we've arrived to the last rifle of the day. This is my James River Armory model 1903 A4 reproduction vintage sniper rifle. And normally it wears a very nice leather sling manufactured by Turner Saddlery. But today, since I'm doing a video about slings versus bags, I decided to try something I don't usually use. This is one of the old standard canvas web slings that were used on rifles from World War II up through Korea, and I believe we still had some of these around even when I was in the Marine Corps in the 1980s. So I'm going to give this a try and see how the groups look when we use this type of a sling as opposed to the 1907 style slings. And then we'll get up and we'll go back to the bench and we'll see how the groups look from back there. Here we go. There's 5 out of the 03A4 from 300 yards. Let's see how we did. And I should have mentioned before I started shooting that normally the 03A4 is fired over top of bags for the vintage sniper rifle competition. So not surprisingly, when I apply the sling, the shots hit very low. And it also has kind of an adverse effect on the accuracy of the rifle. That's about a 15-inch group. So not looking good at all for the 03A4 with the sling. But still, I'll go back and give it one more try, and then we'll shoot it from the bags. And here goes group number 2 from the 03A4. And there's 5 more. Let's see how they look. And I redeemed myself a little bit with this particular group. I've got 4 out of the 5 that are in about 4 inches. So that's not looking too bad. But I had one shot that got away from me, and that opens up the entire group to about 10 inches. I also changed my point of aim that time, which is why these shots are not as low as the other ones. I brought the crosshairs of my reticle right to the top center of the target, so this was where they hit the target. And as you can see, the sun is changing position, so I'm in a shadow, but my rifle is in the sunlight. I'm all set up from 300 yards with the 03A4 from the bag. Let's see how this group looks. And there's 5. Let's go see how they look. And that's a little bit more the group size I've come to expect from this rifle, folks. 4 of those 5 are just over a minute of angle, and the 5th one is right about 6 inches, so about 2 minutes of angle from 300 yards. And I believe this was probably the first shot that I fired when the wind was gusting, or it would have been right over here with the rest of the group. And this is the last 5-shot group of the day, folks. Just so you know, I started this little adventure at about 10 o'clock this morning, and it's about 4:30 in the afternoon right now, so it takes a little while to get all this on video. But here we go. This should be fun. I did make a sight correction, so hopefully this will be a nice group to finish things off with. Had a rifle malfunction, folks. And that last one looked like it went right down the middle. Let's go take a look at our final target. And we finished things up with the tail of the one that got away. Got an X, a 10, another 10 over here, one of them pulled down into the 9, and a solid 8 over here. And the size of our last group is 9 inches, right on the money. And here we are back at the shop, folks. I have to say, taking the footage for this video made for a long day out at the range, so I decided to wait till I got back here to crunch the numbers and see what we could take away from all the shooting that I did. Basically, and to recap, what I ended up with the M1 from the Sling, I had an 8.5 inch group and a 7.25 inch group. Shooting the M1 from the bench, I had a 9.5 inch group and a 9 inch group. So my average with the Sling, with the M1, was a 7 and 7/8 inch group for an average. And the average group size off the bench was a 9.25 inch group. So I actually shot the M1 more accurately, or shot tighter groups with the M1 from the Sling than I did shooting it from a seated bench rest position. With the M14, or the M1A, moving back to 300 yards, I had a 6 inch group and an 8.25 inch group shooting it with the Sling, which made for an average group size of 7 and 1/8 inch average group size, or average group size of 7 and 1/8 inch. From a seated bench rest position with the M1A, I had a 9.5 inch group and a 7 inch group, which makes an average of 8.25 inches for the M1A shooting it from 300 yards. With my AR-15, I had a 5.25 inch group with my first group from the Sling, and an 8.5 inch group for my second group from the Sling, which from 300 yards made an average group size of 6 and 7/8 inches. Shooting it from the bench, I had a smoking 2 and 3/4 inch group, but keep in mind that was a 4-shot group, and had there been a 5-shot or a 5th shot, that group could have opened up. But as it was, I had 4 shots in 2.75 inches from 300 yards from seated bench rest, and a 4.25 inch group was my second group from the seated bench rest with the AR-15. This gave me an average group size with the AR from the seated bench rest of 3.75 inches, or 3 3/4 inches, and the average group size shooting that rifle with the Sling was 6 and 7/8 inch. So considerably better from the seated bench rest with the AR-15, shooting it from the seated bench rest position. I got much tighter groups shooting it that way. With my 03A4, my groups from the Sling were horrible, and that's pretty much in keeping with that rifle when I've shot it from a Sling before. I just do not get good groups with that particular rifle shooting it with a Sling support. First group was 15 inches from 300 yards. Second group was 10 inches from 300 yards, shooting it with the Sling, which made for an average group size of 12.5 inches. And shooting it from a seated bench rest position, I had a 6 inch group and a 9 inch group, making the average group size 7.5 inches. So much better shooting that rifle from a seated bench rest than shooting it with the Sling. So what's the takeaway from all this? Essentially, when I'm shooting iron-sighted rifles, I shoot them better with the Sling than I do from a seated bench rest. Now, the difference in the average group size is not tremendous, but it is measurable. So I really don't see much reason when I'm shooting iron sight groups not to shoot them from a prone, Sling-supported position. On the other hand, when I'm shooting rifles that are outfitted with an optic, I do shoot those better from the seated bench rest position. But the thing that I notice is, or the one thing that occurs to me, is that I don't get the practice shooting them from positions like I would when I'm in a match. Specifically, I'm talking about my AR-15. I'm not shooting it from the prone, Sling-supported position like I would be in a match, so I'm not getting my practice in that I would be when I'm shooting it from the bench rest position. It would strictly be to evaluate loads. With my 03A4, since in competition that's fired over top of a bag, obviously I'm better off shooting it from a seated bench rest position, or probably, truthfully, it'd be best off shooting it from a prone position supported over bags, because that's exactly the way I shoot it in competition. And who knows, maybe that'll be the subject of a future video where I'll compare shooting that rifle from a bench rest position and shooting it from a prone position, both rested over bags, to see which comes out better. I will say that I've shot better groups with that rifle shooting it prone over bags than I shot in this video seated at the bench rest shooting it over top of the bags. So again, it looks like I'm better off shooting it with the Sling when I'm shooting the iron-sighted rifles, better off shooting from the seated bench rest, or from a bench rest position, or a bag rest position, if you will, when I'm using a rifle that's outfitted with optics. So there you go. That's the video for today. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those below as always. And until next time, good shooting. Bye-bye.